Please welcome Koresh Lakhan.
Thank you, David. As David just mentioned that I was not born and raised in India. My ancestors, however, were Indians. They are no longer alive. My grandfather came from Allahabad, India, to British Guyana as an indentured laborer, and I was born on a sugar plantation and went to missionary schools there and then high school as well. My education through the Hindu culture came from the community I was living in at that time. It was not a small community. We constituted about 40% of the population of British Guyana, and we were all influenced by the Christian missionaries at that time. We went to school, and in grade school, from fourth grade onwards, we studied the Old Testament. In high school, for all the years, we did Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Acts of the Apostles. However, in the evenings, we were all schooled in the Hindu culture. So we had schools during the day in the English setting with missionaries, and then in the evening, and in our home, we have the tradition of learning our language, our history, and our culture. During the high school years, I came across Bertrand Russell, and I had the book that's called Why I'm Not a Christian, and that influenced me quite a bit. My uncle, who was the first generation in Guyana, attended the University of Illinois, and I became the recipient of all his discarded books. And among the one with Bertrand Russell was also Huxley, and The Origin of the Species. He also sent me books on Immanuel Kant and John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and these philosophers, Spinoza, Nietzsche, and so forth. And I had a chance to read those while I was in high school, and they challenged my beliefs in all faiths and all religions. And when I came to this country as a student, before I registered for a class, I saw a fellow by the name of John Foster, and he had the Unitarian Universalist congregation. And in those days, you could go and recruit people to follow your faith, and I signed up right away and joined the Unitarian congregation, and we met in the cornfield in Mankato, Minnesota. So that's a little bit about my background. But my parents were Hindus. They're no longer here, so I have to use the past tense. But I was raised in the Hindu culture, practiced all the ceremonies, and they were always there. Almost every week we had a ceremony, and it brought people together. Today's discussion will be about Hinduism as I understand it and as practiced in India and other places in the world. My ancestors, relatives, and my relatives are still in India, and my wife and I have visited them, and I've also taken groups from Duluth to visit India. During those visits, I learned more about India. My grandfather, one side of the family, came from Allahabad, which is right in the Ganges. The other one from Varanasi, which is also 200 kilometers They were farmers, and they were recruited to go work in the sugar plantations in the West Indies. Many of them went to East Africa, some to Fiji. The diaspora took them all over the world. But many of them still kept their faith or some variations of it. Today I'm going to talk about the history of the faith, its development, and the possibilities. Okay? So bear with me. The term Hinduism, Hindus didn't call themselves that. The Persians looked across the Indus River and said, these are Indus, Hindus. It meant a people, not a religion. At that time, a concept that, hey, you have this geography, you are Indus. So they didn't call themselves Hindus. The Persians called them Hindus. The idea of religion is also a complex one. It's a Western construct, religion. The Hindus consider themselves, or most Hindus consider Hinduism as a way of life, not as a religion. Most religions would have a creed that you would follow. In Hinduism, there is, quote, no creed to follow. There are some common threads or common beliefs that are present in the faith system. So a way to describe, in fact, somebody interviewed me one time and asked me, how do you describe a Hindu? And I told them, I'll give you a bowl of Jell-O, a hammer, and a nail, and try to nail it on the wall. Because Hindus come in different stripes, just like Christians. You know, you have, how do you describe a Christian? The Hindus are that way. So it is a religion is also, you know, religion is a Western construct. It deals with worship, quite a bit of it, and it has a God usually and a creed to follow. Hinduism is eclectic, meaning it borrows from all over the place. There's a multiplicity of belief systems within that. And you can choose what you want. It's like going through a smorgasbord. Within the same family, you might have people who will have a different belief system. Example, in my family growing up, I have one brother who is not like me. He's more devout, I would say. I have a sister who goes to a Christian Lutheran church. And I have my dad, the only way he said he would go into a church is with his feet first. My mother will go on religious ceremonies, but has a little shrine in the house. And my older sister is more religious. Usually the oldest in the family gets to be a little bit more religious. But all of them don't wear them on their sleeves, and they would accept. There is lots of intermarriages also within them. Some of them marry Christians, some of them married Hindus, and they practice their own faith, and they support one another about their faith system. India is also another concept. What is India? It is not uniform. In fact, the British named the area India. There were a bunch of principalities there, and you know how the British did try to get the one play one against the other. It was a, very much Machiavellian kind of a thinking in those days, still today. So India is also something that somebody else like Churchill kind of made that stuff up. Get the people together and they will call it India. The boundaries were for political purposes. The oldest living tradition is what we considered India to be. And when they have a list of religions and you would choose to put them in chronological order, you will find Hinduism there at the top. And I will try to share something with you about how folks describe Hinduism, if I can find it. Anyway, Ian Forster, who has written a lot about India, said you can study India and Hinduism with the best of teachers. You can go and live there, and when you raise your head and you look around, nothing seems to fit. Meaning it's like I made the analogy of a jello. The Indus Valley civilization existed about 2500 BC, and they had the plumbing system that was very advanced, indoor plumbing, and also ritual baths were also available because they found these depressions in the ground and found out that they had ritual baths there. And a proto-Shiva, meaning they had him in a lotus position, so they theorized that there was a meditation going on or contemplation. They also found that some of the figurines there had horns, so they incorporate some of the animal characteristics in them. About that time, though, we have the Aryans. You probably heard the term Aryans. They actually came from the steppes of Russia, and they were what we call Bronze Age people who rode on horsebacks, spoke Sanskrit, and brought their Hindu gods with them. They had the nature gods like Indra and Agni, and gave us the word igneous fire, and the female goddesses as well. They all came and they were incorporated into the Hindu tradition, and over the years the Sanskrit became the base for their theology, and the Vedas was their main text. And to many Hindus, that's considered to be revealed, whatever that might mean. And they follow the text of that. Most Hindus have never read the Vedas. They've heard it from their priests and the temple mission and during ceremonies, but have not read the Vedas. But there were four major ones, but the one that talks about what we call rituals was the Rig Veda. And the Rig Veda is what most people in India would practice because it deals with a lot of rituals. And this is the area that's called Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Now this area is in Pakistan, but this is the area we have the Indus Valley civilization. When the Aryans came here, they met the people in Mohenjo-Daro area, and they intermingled with them. Apparently, there were no fighting going on because they found out there were not weapons available there. So they figured they were absorbed into the system. The language is still undeciphered, but they're studying it. It was rediscovered in about 1825, and 100 years thereafter, they started to do some digging, and now they are studying more about that civilization. Yes?
Can we ask questions?
Yes, sure.
They brought Sanskrit?
The Aryans brought Sanskrit and met the dwellers or citizens of Mohenjo-Daro area.
And they had writing?
Yes, they had writing.
And that's what they're deciding?
Yeah. These are the Aryans they were talking about, and it was an oral tradition, just like in old days. And the Aryan views of the natural world, they had three levels: the earthly plane. There is also the middle plane, and then the one above that. Again, these are traditional thinking, and all religions, the major faiths today, came about when the earth was flat. So many of these thoughts would probably not fit today, but there are gems inside as well. So you take them with. The Vedas has what we call a stratified society, and that meant that they look at society in those days, and the top group would be the gatekeepers to heaven, and they were called the Brahmins. And Brahmins mean they have knowledge of Brahma, meaning the universal power in the universe. And the Brahmins. Below the Brahmins were the Kshatriyas. These were the military force, and they guard society, protect the people, and the church, I would imagine. The third group of this stratified societies were the Vaishyas. Vaishyas were the farmers and the merchants. And there's a fourth group also who were the ones who did the domestic work, the cleaning, and cobblers and so forth. They dealt with animals. And beyond that were they called the outcasts. These are people who were outside of the caste system in India or in Hinduism. The caste system also had what we call color. It's called Varna. Varna means color. Because of the several groups of invaders who came in there, the lighter skinned people, just like in the US, were on top. And the colors went down all the way unto people who were probably darker and darker. So it became, in many societies we do have variations, but it was very stratified this way and not vertical. And that became a big problem. And there's also another term they call jati, which is birth. You're born in it rather than, and you're locked into that system. And that is like we call a deviation from what it was originally intended to be, and that is to have a society that is stratified based upon skills or merit rather than color or birth.
And all this was brought by the Aryans.
It was more than the Aryans. The Aryans were the ones who brought Sanskrit, and they were lighter skinned. They had the Vedas, and the Vedas were knowledge. Vedas means knowledge. In fact, it gives us the word video, videre, to see. And if you have knowledge, you become the gatekeeper. They promised you the other world, you had to go through them. And they had elaborate sacrifices. And the sacrifices were just like you have them in Greeks and the Christians and so forth. They had those sacrifices, animal sacrifices. Later on, that was, in fact, today, instead of having animal sacrifice in the Hindu ceremonies, they have fire. And the fire is a symbol of that sacrifice, and they will throw incense or wheat or things like that. So it's kind of a sublimation of that animal sacrifice, because you please the gods if you let them breathe that good stuff. And what way to do that? The Hindus look upon the world and it's in chaos. And to bring order into chaos, they have to do the rituals. In fact, the word rituals is a Sanskrit word Ritu means cosmic order. And they will placate these gods with sacrifice. Then about the axial age, called Jaspers, I think the name of the guy who designated that, between 800 BCE and 200 BCE, light bulbs start to happen around the world, not only in India. Buddha came during that period as well. The Vedas was very popular, but also the thinkers became more, they were urban civilization. People started to question one another, and there came the Upanishads. Heard about the Upanishads, anybody? And there are many of the Upanishads, and that is where you have the Berkeley, Berkeley campus during the Vietnam. That was the Berkeley period when people started to question authority and go out in the streets and demonstrate. It happened in India in about between that, the axial age where light bulbs start to happen. This sign, Om, I notice is in tattoos with people walking down the street. A little bit of definition of that. If you look at it, the Hindus believe that the original sound of the universe, and in the Christian theology, it's the word that came up first. It was the word. It is a sound of the beginning, the universe, Om. And if you are a speech pathologist, you probably understand that that takes the fewest muscles in your face to say the word Om. It's like a vowel. AU is a diphthong, Om. And the bottom part of that circle here represents the waking state, what we are here right now. The curve that goes this way is the dreaming state, when you dream. And the third part there represent deep sleep. The separation here, where you have that curve, separates you from Maya. Maya means things that are happening now that you can measure. The dot here represent the super self, meaning the universe. And the Hindus try to move from this state on the bottom to the other one for what we call reality, which is the super self or the universe. There are so many definitions of this here. A whole text could be written on the sound of Om. Google it if you have interest. Theories of the myth of creation, and there are various ones. Some of them are conflicting as well. And that's the beauty of the choices you have in this faith system. There's one, I remember growing up, we had the Sanskrit on Om Hiranya Garva Sarvant, Bhutasta Jata Patirekayasi. Vinud would probably recognize that. And that is, the egg opens up like this, like the world. The top part becomes the sky, the bottom part the earth. In the middle, with the fertilized egg, you can see the veins, the rivers, and so forth. And the fluid in there, the oceans. That was one theory of the myth. There's Shiva, the dancing Shiva. You probably heard about that. He has a drum in one hand and fire in the other hand. He bangs the drum and sets in motion life in the universe. And the other hand, he has fire, and that's the destruction. Shiva is known as the creator, the preserver, and destroyer, and there is a cycle in life. And in time, the Hindus don't believe in a linear time frame. It's circular. And there's sign of an expectation of what is an epoch or an era is described that if you take a bird and have a bird take a scarf and fly on top of Mount Everest once every 100 years, and then brush the scarf on the top, it will take, one epoch would be how long it will take to bring that mountain down to the sea level. That's one epoch in the Hindu thinking. There is Vishnu as well, who talk about every time he blinks his eye, a new era begins. The other one is a spider emitting itself in the universe. It's meaning the universe is like a spider and it emits itself, and we have the universe. Another one is Prajapati, which is, if you look up in the sky, you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the constellations. It said in the beginning they were all together, and they got separated. And through rituals, we can bring them back together. In other words, you perform rituals to bring cosmic order out of chaos. The Vedas also, and this is a quote from the Vedas, what was all this before creation, meaning the universe? What was it before creation? And it says, was there water? Only God knows. Or perhaps he knows not. Perhaps one will never know. And that's in the Vedas. I challenge you to find any other faith tradition that offers you those choices. I talked about this already. I then also mentioned the actual age and the transition from rituals were leaky boats. The Hindus found out they could not take you from one place to the other. They were leaky boats. Rituals were leaky boats. People moved from what we called the exoteric to the esoterics, meaning forms that are physical to the abstract metaphysical ideal, meaning you can think it in your head. You don't have to go through all these ceremonies. They were, in fact, my wife and I went to our village, my family village in India, and one of my uncles in Chicago gave me some money and said, let's do a puja, which is a religious ceremony. And I talked with my relatives there, and the guy rolled his eyes. Brahmins, they don't like them, the bloodsuckers. And this is their priest they're talking about there. So they have a different idea of what, they would rather do their own ceremony rather than have a gatekeeper doing it for them. This is the actual age where Hindus were trying to say that rituals are really leaky boats. Yes, this is the Upanishads. And these are some of the texts, the Vedas, which means knowledge book. The Upanishads means to sit down by somebody and have a dialogue. This is a Socratic method where you sit down and you talk with your guru and you find your answers. And the guru would say what Buddha copied from the Vedas. Don't believe what I say. Don't take him with it. Find your own truth. That's from the Vedas. The Puranas, which is the end of the Vedas, the Ramayanas, and there are also the Bhagavad Gita. Has anybody heard about the Bhagavad Gita? Okay. That's influenced quite a few people in the world. In fact, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, by the way, is one of 18 volumes from the longest poem. It's have 100,000 verses in the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita is just one of them. Now, the Ramayana is the story of an ideal husband and wife, and it's really a book that most Hindus are familiar with, besides the Bhagavad Gita. The Vedas is rather abstract, and it's hard to comprehend. It is more literary, so there might be much more you can understand why most people don't read the Vedas. In fact, in India, the illiteracy rate is very high. The Upanishads, there is no joy in finite, only infinite. Free, unbounded, full of joy is our native state. We have fallen from the state and seek it everywhere. Every human activity is an attempt to fill this void. But as long as we try to fill it outside of ourselves, we are making demands on life which life cannot fulfill. Nothing can satisfy us but reunion with the real self, which is Sat Chit Ananda, absolute reality, pure awareness, and unconditional joy. If you recall the fellow by the name of Joseph Campbell, he quoted the Sat Chit Ananda when he was talking about Hinduism, utter joy. And that is what the Upanishad talk about, the infinite. There's some more on the self here. The self is the sun shining in the sky, the wind blowing in space. He's the fire at the altar, and in the home, the guest. He dwells in human beings, in gods, in truth, and in the vast firmament. He is the fish born in the water, the plant growing in the earth, the river flowing down the mountain. The self is supreme. And with the Hindus believe that you can achieve that union with the self by following paths. There are four goods in life. Dharma, which is the first one, is a Sanskrit word, means duty, and duty is described as that which upholds the universe. Moral order, taking care of your family, taking care of your community, taking care of the water, the air, the earth. That is what duty is. And what is important in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the book that talks more about duty, says that when you do that duty, you do it without any feeling for attachment to it. In other words, you do it just because it is the right thing to do, and it is not an investment. Investment meaning you expect something in return. The Bhagavad Gita says that doing it because it's the right thing to do is the moral imperative, and it's not based on getting a reward. If you expect a reward, then it is not a good. Dharma, that's dharma, duty. Artha is wealth. This is probably the only faith tradition said, go get it. Wealth is good. Not greed, however. And if you remember the guy who wrote of The Wealth of Nations, yeah. Now he had a warning in there too, that greed is not good. You have to be stewards of the earth. But guess what we took? Yeah, we took greed is good, and God blesses us because we are successful by owning more stuff. Now, artha, wealth, material possessions are good. It helps you with your family. It's how you use it. It's good to sustain society and to go and get it. But do it in an ethical fashion. The other one is kama. Kama means pleasure. This is another one of the faith tradition will say, what do you mean we can have fun? He said, if you like sex, go and have it, man. If you like music, go and have it. If you like food, go and have it. But do it in ethical fashion. Do it in doesn't forbid it, so that nature provides us with all these sense organs. Why not use them? But use them wisely. Moksha is the highest order, and that is release from all of these things. So the Hindus are saying that, is this all? And I think all faith traditions say that. Is this all? And the Hindus, these are all finite. Can you imagine, somebody like Bill Gates, he has so much money, and Zuckerberg, and Bezos, and all these guys. They don't have the money. It's no more fun. It's not as much fun as making the first $1,000. So that you get to the point where you have surfeit, or you have enough and enough. And the same thing with, Hugh Hefner. You remember him? You can have so much pleasure. You can eat so much food, so much music, and so forth. The Hindus call those are what we call finite. The same thing with, all of these things are measurable. The Hindu says, that's not all. What is it that we need? And the Hindus say, we go for the infinite. And what are infinite? Being. Being is important. And being, I do this class at St. Scholastica University for seniors as well. And I said to the students here, when you take a group picture, where does your eyes go first? And it's usually towards you. You look for yourself being there. If you have a directory, where do you page through first? You want to see if you're in there. So we have this need to be. Being is very important. And in the Hindu tradition, that's infinite. And that being is always, you never give this is a body, but your soul, according to the Hindu tradition, is indivisible, and it looks for perfection before it can unite with the super self. In other words, the Hindus say, you are the wave. Right now we are the wave in the ocean. And enlightenment comes when the wave realizing, hey, we are the ocean. That's enlightenment of the Hindu tradition. So the self is like the wave, the small self. When it realizes its way, that it is the ocean, then that is becoming the state of moksha, bliss, in other words. There are some stages, and these are the old system. They don't do this very much now. The Hindu one, you have a student phase, a householder phase, a forest dweller, meaning you're retiring, sannyasi, meaning you divest yourself of all the material possessions and you live. It's like going into retirement of a sort. And there are paths for those going into union with the universe, and there are three paths. One of them is action. Action is what you do, your work, and thought as well, because there's no separation between thought and action, according to the Hindus, and that karma one, duty. In fact, if you go to India, and my wife found that for the first time, we stayed with the family in New Delhi, and Jill would say, thank you, for doing stuff. And the guy got upset and said, why do you thank me? Why do you thank me? It's my duty. It's my duty. Our son went to India for the first time too, and he stayed with some of the cousins. And when they passed the food, thank you, thank you. Said, why do you say thank you? Why do you say thank you? That's my duty. Now, For us in the West, we think a thank you is the appropriate thing to do. And I recall when I was in college, my aunt's mother sent me a shirt. And then I got a letter from my uncle, said, why don't you write a letter to thank you? And that was not in my thinking. Because if you give me that shirt, you gave it to me, but you're expecting a thank, then it's not a gift for the Hindu tradition. You know? So it's a kind of a different way for that. So doing action without expecting a reward is the ultimate. Knowledge or wisdom is the other one, or other path. Hindus believe that if you have knowledge and it is not algebra, it's not trigonometry, it's reading between the lines kind of a knowledge. The Hindus believe, in the Christian theology, you fall away, you broke the law. In the Hindu theology, you don't know yourself. It's like having a lamp with a dirty lampshade. Clean it out, and you find out that, hey, you are God. You are the universe. It's not breaking the law. It's knowing who you are, truly. And it's not out there. You don't seek it out there. You come inside, because that's where it's at. And you are the universe. You're stardust. You are not part of, you are, in other words. The other one is Bhakti Yoga. This is also gives you a choice. If you want to be a devotee and have a religious or faith tradition, that's also another path. And you can choose one of them, or all of them, or none of them. So these are some of the choices you have. The path of action is the most important discipline for the majority of Hindus. The principal feature of this form of spirituality is performing seva, was doing one's duty, what is necessary to promote the welfare. And I think I spoke about that. The path of wisdom is rooted in the axial age, when the most important Hindu response to the anxieties about death and rebirth were recorded in the collection of texts called the Upanishads. Hinduism affirms not only multiplicity of divine, but also the multiplicity of path to the divine reality. And most important and beloved of Hindu texts, the Bhagavad Gita is the place to find those paths. One must be willing to give up the three other goods, even though doing one's duty and pursuing wealth and enjoyment are viewed positively. They keep one bound to the wheel of rebirth. For those who are not yet prepared to abandon a life of duty, material acquisitions, and enjoyment, the religious life means doing one's best to improve this life and future lives. I'm going through quick because I think we have a time issue here. It's a little bit more about the divinity. There is also the female aspect. The Hindus believe the universe is feminine, and they have male gods and goddesses, but the male gods are impotent unless they get the help of female goddesses.
Use the mic.
Oh, sorry. The male gods are impotent without the help of the goddesses. And the goddesses are two parts. Some of them are consorts or wives, and they are what we call supportive and gentle and instructive. And then there are the independent goddesses, and they are more vengeful. This is one of the goddesses here, Saraswati, and she is pictured, she's the goddess of knowledge and the arts and embodies the wisdom of the mother goddess. She is the river of consciousness that enlivens creation. She is the dawn goddess whose rays dispel darkness and ignorance. Without her, there is chaos and confusion. Many of the Hindus, especially during exam times, will go and do their supplication. Durga, this is a female goddess and very popular in the Hindu tradition. And again, there are many Hindus who still use these images, and they are like what we call runways to the the divine, and it's where they are at, right? The Hindus also believe that there are two kinds of ages. One is called the chronological age and the psychological age. The chronological age is like, right now we have, and I hate to pick on the guy, but our president is 71? That's a chronological age. But his psychological age might be different. So the folks who are on the runway platform, this is a different chronological age, psychological age, excuse me. This is a different psychological age. They need that. And if you take it out, just like, I know the old analogy, if somebody asks you, where is West Duluth, and you point it over there, you move your hand, is West Duluth there? It's still there. So the hand becomes irrelevant, just like this statue here becomes irrelevant. It just points you to the direction, and it's not necessary once you move your hand away. Same thing, if you put that away, it's still there. The divine is still there. So these are actually pointers or runways. And of course, they attribute character, our emotions and feelings to these forces. Most Hindus believe that these forces lie inside of us, and we are projecting them out. Ganesh, almost all festivals in India start out with invoking his presence. He's known for removing barriers and also wisdom. And elephants have good memory. You've probably heard that. They have some characteristics of human beings, because they have strength, and we want those strengths, and they have long life. We want the long life, so they're incorporated into the Hindu tradition. This is the dancing Shiva. I remember I spoke to you earlier about this. Shiva bangs the drum, creation of the world and destruction, but of course there's maintenance during that process there. Shiva is standing on a human there, and that human represents the ego and ignorance. So he's stepping in ignorance, and while he's doing this dance. The dancing Shiva. Shiva is a form of a cosmic dancer. It combines a single image, Shiva's role as a creator, preserver, and destroyer. What's happening in India or in the Hindu community worldwide, there's economic revolution in India, meaning you can see that India is on the cusp of a world nation. The projection now is that with 2050, India and China would be the power in the world. And it's based on not only demographics, but also the economics of the region. It's becoming more urbanized. The culture is shifting and changing. The politics, however, took a little dark dive recently. The fundamentalist group has, and it's not only in India, it's also in Europe and at home. If you notice, there is a trend in that. But we hope, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was talking about the nice thing about the American culture is like a pendulum. When it shifts too much one way, it swings back, and we hope that might happen. And in India, there's the same thing. People are becoming more educated. My wife and I, when we were there a few years ago, we had some young kids, and then one morning about 4 o'clock, that alarm clock, they had the wine one, rang. The kid got up, and I followed him through the rice fields with a flashlight, and he was going there to study algebra. 4 o'clock in the morning, he was going there, and I followed him. We're going to have to compete with those folks. Today, those folks that we have are grown up now. One worked in Germany as an engineer. The other one just got back from Myanmar in the pharmaceutical industry. These are the same kids that we're going to compete with. So education is very much into the minds, and boy, do they have tutors for boys and girls as well. There was a time when the girls were given a push in the background. Not anymore, especially into the urban areas. The women are equally, in the schools. There's also social. In the old days, people marry according to their caste or within their caste, just like Catholics used to marry Catholics here, and Lutherans, and Finns will marry Finns, and Italians marry Italians. It's changed in America. Now it's also changing and what's changing it? Education. And in this country, we say green dollars. If you have economic power, you go across caste lines, cultural lines, and so forth. The diaspora, our children now, we have 3 of them. One is at UMD. He's an atheist. One is in cybersecurity. He's another atheist. A daughter, marketing, another atheist. A wife, better not say, but I think she's an agnostic. Yeah. And here I am, another atheist. So we think that we can be good and devout and caring without the supernatural. But I will not give up my ceremonies or my food or the pleasure of company and the things that bring us all together when we have our holidays. Just like, we have a ham roasting right now while we are talking about. And here I am, raised as a Hindu, and I'm going to have ham. Jesus would not, but I would. I know we're probably out of time, but there might be questions if anybody has any. Thank you.